Welcome back, guys. Alum Lion here, bringing you the Winnabox number 2 finals. We've got Septemis up here in the top. We've got DDD Scrub, aka Danique DeJong, aka the TCG Philosopher here, down in the bottom. Both of these guys are YouTubers. I'll leave the links to their YouTubes in the description below. Their links are also in the index channel of the Speed Duel Discord if you want to check them out. Let's get into this finals. We're going to start it off with the rock, paper, scissors match, the most skillful part of the game. I think we can all agree. So it looks like they're going to tie here with paper. Great minds think alike. Let's see what they're going to lead off with the second time. It looks like Danique sticks with the paper. Septemis, bit of a misplay, swaps over to the rock. Should have seen the paper coming. But that's going to award Danique a little bit of an advantage here as he gets to decide if he wants to go first or second. He's going to take first. You usually don't see that very often. We have the skills come down. I'm just going to let you guys know it is a Dark Moth versus TP Warrior match. And so right off the bat here, Danique should be flipping. There we go. He should be flipping up the TP skill. You have to flip that up whenever the duel starts. Here you can see at the start of the duel, flip this card over. Danique just gonna set one monster and then pass his turn. I wonder if he drew all monsters or some sort of brick. Usually you want to see more than one set and then passing your turn. More than likely a command knight if you had to guess. But it could be something he just doesn't want to get paranoided. So Septemis drops the Allure. Again, Allure is not a plussing card. You don't generate any additional card advantage off of it, but you do sort of get to reset your hand by allowing you to see 2 more cards. So it can kind of lead to more consistent hands and just let you draw through your deck a little bit more. So Septemis here, 2 sets, and then setting his own monster. Knowing that this is Dark Moth, you gotta expect a Newdoria or a Dekoichi, more than likely, but we'll see what Danique wants to do. If he want to flips his monster face up, go on the aggressive, try and get some card advantage, obviously leaving him open to a Paranoid play that Septemis most likely has because of the Allure, because he got to see 2 additional cards in the deck. So though Septemis is running a 25 card deck, so and Danique sets his, so he had all of these cards in his hand last turn and just decided not to, which is going to cost him here. The Dust Tornado comes down and Danique won't be able to chain anything. He hits a Wild Tornado. That's what? No, oh no. So he hit the Wild Tornado, but he had nothing for Danique to pop. A Wild Tornado, whenever it's destroyed, can only pop face-up cards, and there was nothing face-up, but then Septemis lets him know that he chains Zoma. So he got to see the Wild Tornado get destroyed, then he chained Zoma. I think if he did that just a little bit slower, he could have not have chained Zoma, and the Zoma wouldn't have had to die there, but he basically gave Danique the play. I guess that's honorable because I do think Septemis planned on chaining in the first place, but the fact that he saw the Wild Tornado before he typed chain, should have just delete that message, don't let him know you planned on chaining. But the Night Beam comes down, he hits an Offerings, flips up the Dekoichi, goes +1 here. So no one's really generated too much advantage here. We still have a 4 versus 3 cards here, mainly because it's still 4 versus 3, which is Septemis was already up a card because he went second, so he got the draw first. So he already starts the duel off basically up 1 in tempo. And then Danique draws, which will kind of even it out. So now they're both at 4 here. He doesn't attack with the Dekoichi, most likely because he doesn't think it can get over either of those face-down monsters, and it would just give Twisted Personality a counter to use. Twisted Personality with 2 counters can rip a card out of your opponent's hand. With 3 counters, can destroy 1 face-up card your opponent controls. So Danique is going to flip up the Command Knight. Command Knight's effect gives all warriors 400 attack that you control, so the Command Knight is actually 1600 attack, which is bigger than the 1400 Dekoichi. He's just going to swing over it. Take the 200, that's going to give Twisted Personality a counter. And then we're going to see how Septemis reacts. Does he have a Paranoid to come down onto the Command Knight? He has another Dekoichi. Okay, so those Dekoichis are reaping dividends. That's 2 pluses off the Dekoichis. So Septemis is now up a card again, 5 versus 4 here. Twisted Personality again, only 1 counter. You have to assume that Septemis has a Paranoid play at this point. He went through an Allure. He's gone through 11 cards in his 25 card deck, so you'd have to assume he's seen 1 Paranoid at least, and potentially a Moth in hand. And he's going to swing this time. That's interesting because he wasn't swinging last time. Now if he takes damage, now it will give Twisted Personality a counter, and it wasn't, it's a Midoriya, okay. If that was a Command Knight or a Gear Freed, Twisted Personality would have had 2 counters, and then it goes back to Danique's turn, and he can rip a card out of Septimus's hand, so. Little risky. But the Midoriya is going to kill the Dekoichi, and then Danique's just going to swing here. Does Septimus have anything? No, he just takes the full 16, okay. So more than likely, this is where I expect the Paranoid to come out. This is an issue that Dark Moth kind of has, is all of its monsters are very, very weak. And so you look at something like a 1600 Command Knight, with 1900 defense, they can't really get over that without either a Zoma or a Paranoid. So here comes the Paranoid play. Septimus, not really a choice here. Looking a little risky because Twisted Personality has 2 counters. So if he deals any damage here, he's going to have his 3rd counter and he can immediately pop the Moth. Here comes a second Wild Tornado to destroy the Paranoid. Does Septimus have the Moth in the hand? He does. You have to expect that with Dark Moth. They have so much draw power between the Dekoichis and Allures, they usually will have a Moth in there. Even though they're running 25 card decks, they go through those cards fairly quickly. And so you have to expect a Moth in the hand and a Moth in the deck. But again, an issue is that Twisted Personality will have its 3rd counter coming here. And the Zoma would be game. So Septimus is not going to activate his Paranoid skill. He's not going to activate the second effect of the Cocoon of Ultra Evolution, which lets him shuffle back that Paranoid that was destroyed by Wild Tornado and draw a new card. Interesting, he may have forgot, or he may just not care, or he may be afraid that he'd draw his last Moth. So let's see. So during the standby phase, he's going to drop Paranoid onto the Zoma. So the Zoma will not be able to attack Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth. Paranoid prevents the equipped monster from attacking insect monsters. So he's equipped to Zoma. Zoma will be an insect. Great Moth is obviously an insect. So Zoma cannot attack Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth. So that's a smart play from Septimus. Sort of locks the Zoma. And seeing that Danique already went through 2 of his Wild Tornadoes, you know, he may not have, he may only have like 1, maybe 2 cards left in the deck that can pop back row. So that Zoma may be locked down. It's going to be difficult. Septimus doesn't really have a way to get that Nightmare Wheel off of his Moth. And then of course the Twisted Personality. The 3rd counter, he's going to be able to use it sort of as a mini pop and just pop the Paranoid as well. And not have to worry about a Moth coming out of hand because it was the only card in Septimus's hand. So difficult board for Septimus to break. We'll see if he can. Twisted Personality has no more counters. He's only gotten to use it 1 time, so it's only the +1. He has 2 Paranoids in his graveyard, but he will be able to shuffle 1 back and draw next turn. So Septimus will see 2 cards this turn if he activates his skill. Not sure. Maybe he's thinking, okay, he wants to do the Zoma and the in-phase, bring it out. Very difficult. This may just be something where Danique knows that he can just stall at this point. Again, Dark Moth, not very big monsters. The Moth play is the only real board presence that they bring out. Their monsters are overall pretty weak, so he can just kind of sit in defense mode like this with a 1900 Command Knight, and Septimus can't really threaten anything. If Septimus does do any damage to Danique, it's only going to benefit Danique. He's going to get counters on his Twisted Personality skill. So Septimus is going to shuffle the Paranoid back, draw another card. Potentially the last big play that Septimus has available to him is the Paranoid play, which he may not be able to do. He has 2 Paranoids in the deck, 12 cards, but he's going to get aggressive. He's going to swing with the Zoma. We'll see what he swings into. These guys are playing on different sides of the world, so... Or actually, no, I think Septimus is in Europe too. So there shouldn't be any latency issues. I wonder what's... They're just thinking. They're just thinking. Septimus is going to take 500 here. So he has 3 turns left to get out of this situation. Zoma versus Zoma on the field. So we did 5 finally get an answer to the Zoma versus Zoma interaction. And that'll be 0 damage dealt. And then Zoma versus Gearfried's, if Zoma dies, or crashes, sorry, with a Gearfried, both 1800 attack, then 1800 damage will be dealt. So we did get answers to that question. That's very useful. So the Zomas can crash here, and no damage would be dealt, but he's most likely going to swing it into the Perfectly Ultimate Great Moth. This would be game. No, he has the Nightmare Wheel down. Tanique has the Twister, so he saw 2 Wild Tornadoes and a Twister. Lots of back row hate, I believe. Septimus also saw a lot of back row. Dust, Night Beam. There's just a lot of back row hate in the game. Interesting that only 1 Dust, so we had 5 total back row get popped. And by cards anyways, and only 1 of them was Dust. But he has 2 Nightmare Wheels. It's a little interesting that he was kind of hanging on to those, because those could have potentially been doing 1,000 damage per turn. But instead, Danique was just sitting at 4,000 the entire time. I think he set 1 recently though, so he may have only had access to 1. But regardless, that Zoma's going to be stuck. He's going to tribute. There's the Jinzo, so all of the traps on the field no longer work. That's very, very beneficial to Septimus. So I would actually give Septimus quite the advantage here. And Tanique is actually just going to scoop the game. He did have his Twisted Personality counters to attempt to get out of that situation. But at that point, he's just going to scoop. No point. Little interesting, because there is no time issue here. We don't run into time like you would at a YCS or something. So I don't think there's too much of a downside to just trying to play that out. You do have the Twisted Personality counters. There are no traps. I think Danique has the Offerings to the Doom, but perhaps not. We're going to go inside here. Danique has a very interesting sideboard that we'll be getting into later in the video. I may... Yeah, we'll definitely go over the deck lists during this video. We'll go over the top 8 briefly. You know, we won't touch on anything that's too... If things are standard, you know, we'll just kind of gloss over them. But some decks have some interesting things that I'm sure you guys would like to look at. So, siding here, Danique, your sideboard's very straightforward. It's either you side him in or you don't. Why are you taking this long? Call the judge. He's stalling for time. You either side in the package or you don't. Okay, there we go. So here we go. Danique gets to decide if he wants to go first or second this time. Last time he chose first. Interesting. I don't play a lot of TP Warrior, but there. So he takes second this time. Usually first or second is, do you want to set up your board first or do you want to take card advantage first? So there's the TP skill comes down. So doesn't look like anybody swapped skills or anything, so it is still TP versus Dark Moth. Septimus setting 1 card, passing his turn, potentially has Paranoids or Moths in the hand. Set potentials are Dekoichi, Nudoria, Maneater Bug, things like that. I think it's mostly just Dekoichi and Nudoria, but... Drops the Gearfried. Somewhat good in the Paranoid matchup because they cannot attach a Paranoid to it. It will be destroyed. So we'll see what he set here. Could be another Dekoichi. He's going to sphere that attack. Interesting. So he did not want whatever that is to get flipped face up. We'll have to see if he's protecting something very special here. Allure. So you can see whenever the Allure came down, he had 3 cards in his hand. Allure plus 2 cards. And so you're going to see Allure draw 2. And then you're going to see Banish 1, and Allure go to the grave, and now you look at his hand, it's still 3 cards, and that's why there's no plussing. Allure is simply drawing advantage, it sort of digs deeper into your deck, speeds things up if you're running a combo deck, which I guess, you know, Speed Duels doesn't really have combo decks per se, but sort of decks that have pieces, right, like a Relinquish deck or a Dark Moth deck. He set a Sphere Karibo and sphered to protect that Sphere Karibo. That's very interesting. So not the best opening hand. So he opened Gap, Sphere, Sphere. Were 3 cards in his opening hand. Brutal. He's going to look to try and paranoid his own monster, his own Sphere Karibo. But he's not able to. The Twister comes down to Neek. So he's got Twisters, he's got Wild Tornadoes. He's going to pay 500. He's going to get a counter on Twisted Personality, which hasn't put down yet, but hopefully he does. That's going to bring out the perfect ultimate Great Moth. Though again, Dark Moth, they've almost always got the Moth in the hand. You know, I know they usually only run 2, but they have so much draw power. You almost have to expect them to have the Moth in the hand. So Danique put the counter down on the Twisted Personality. So we have a Moth and a Sphere Karibo on the board. Very interesting. The attack comes through with Moth. Danique thinking what his back rows are. Does he want to potentially lock up the Moth with a Nightmare Wheel? Taking his time. He's going to let the Gear Free die. Okay. He's going to attack with the Sphere Karibo. I don't know if I agree with a play like that. It would give Danique a counter for a very, very low amount of damage. It doesn't really give you any sort of breakpoint damage for the most part. Being at 35 or being at 32, Nightmare Wheel doesn't kill a turn sooner or anything, so. But Danique is going to summon his Zoma, and Zoma has 400 defense. It almost never comes up, but here it did, where it's just Sphere Karibo cannot get over the Zoma. So we're most likely going to see the Zoma swing into the Sphere Karibo. That would actually be very detrimental. That would do enough damage to where the Moth then cannot retaliate and swing over the Zoma. But we're going to see it get Nightmare Wheeled. Danique, no Wild Tornado or anything to pop the Nightmare Wheel, so that will stick. The Zoma's locked up for a little bit. Going to take 500. Here comes the Evolution play. I don't know why Septimus waits it, because he could have done this last turn. He could have popped the skill and seen a card that turn, but instead waits until the next turn to do it. So a little interesting, but I'm sure he has a reason. So we've got 5 cards to 4 cards, despite the fact that Danique got to go second, so he should be up a card. Twisted Personality sitting on 2 counters. Septimus sets his entire hand, so those 2 counters aren't going to be relevant. Ooh. The Moth swings into a Newdoria, basically a better Man-Eater bug, allows him to target one monster on the field and destroy it. And he's going to pop the Moth, so Septimus leaves the Sphere Karibo in attack mode. Little interesting. Septimus, he's maybe a little nervous, I don't know, waiting a turn to do the Moth plus, most likely as a reason. Doesn't put the Sphere Karibo into defense mode, that's going to cost him a good chunk of life here. It's going to be another TP counter, so now there's 3 counters on Twisted Personality, which means that the next turn that Danique has, he can pop that Nightmare Wheel and the Zoma will be live. But Septimus has 2 back row, those can be his own Zomas, those can be additional Nightmare Wheels. Hopefully they're not back row hate. Septimus doesn't see a monster, potentially a Genzo or another tributable monster, another Moth, or a back row card that he just can't set right now. Danique, he's going to make that Twisted Personality play. He's going to remove the 3 counters, most likely targeting. Most likely, I believe that's his only target. He could have removed 2 and ripped a card out of the hand, but he frees up his Zoma. This will be lethal if both these attacks go through. A Zoma would not be too detrimental. He lets the first attack go through. He's not scooping, which makes me think he has something. Okay, he does have the Dust Tornado to get the Zoma off the field. Zoma is both a monster and a trap card, so he can be destroyed with things like Dust Tornado. But Septimus still has to deal with Command Knight. Again, TP Warrior, their monsters are simply bigger. It's very difficult to deal with. Septimus, however, has not activated the first effect of his Cocoon, so he still has a Paranoid play available to him. You see the Allure play, simply just drawing a new card, basically. So he has 3 back row. Danique, 1 counter on Twisted Personality. Double Command Knight. This now creates a lock. You cannot attack either Command Knight, but Septimus does still have his Paranoid play available to him to get one of the Command Knights off the field. The Zoma comes down. This will not be lethal if he destroys it. So DD Scrub can continue the attack on the Zoma if he wants. He will still have 500 life points at the end of it because both Command Knights are at 2,000 attack currently. He offerings off the Zoma, so Danique will not be able to draw next turn. Does Septimus have another card to stop the attack here? Lag. You've been lagging all game, apparently, Danique. You take forever. Here's the attack for game. Dusts. Is he just showing his... Does he have another Dust Tornado in the back row? Anything else, says Danique. Nope. This is where you scoop. Alright, there we go. I wish we got to see what the other back row card was, but honestly it's best not to reveal cards at that point and just let the attack go through and make your opponent wonder what your set cards were. But we're going to set again. Danique will have another opportunity to see if he wants to side in his package. Septimus. It's always weird after you side the first game, you know, you only have 6 cards to work with. A lot of times you may not side again for the third game. You kind of got your deck where you wanted it to be. But this is game 3. This is for all the marbles. Game 3, everything's on the line. I wonder if we should do best of 5 or something for the finals. Go 5 games. These videos would be far too long though. But Danique, yet again, deciding. Your side deck is not that... It's a yes or no, Danique. So here we go. Danique taking first this time. So he took first, then he took second. I'm sorry, Septimus got to choose. So he made Danique go first. Still wondering why Danique took first game 1. But here we go. So round 3, game 3. Okay, round 3 was several weeks ago. This is game 3. No swappings of skills or anything. Pretty standard. You could see TP swap skills, but Dark Moth, I don't think there's any Dark Moth deck that swaps their skill. So Danique, glad this isn't a 2-0. So Danique has the first play here. Will we see another set monster? Set, pass. There you go, set, pass. Okay. So Septimus sees the first draw. A little awkward for Dark Moth to deal with sort of a all face down opener that can't look to Paranoid play or anything. Septimus sets, is that another Sphere Karibo? No back row anything. Potentially good, potentially bad for Dark Moth player. Could mean that he's got his Paranoid and Moth play in hand. Danique set again, so this is post Trials of the Kingdom gameplay here. Everybody just setting. So he gets the free Dekoichi draw. Doesn't lose the Dekoichi either, so he can still use it to attack. Usually the Dekoichi's dying in battle whenever it gets to draw, so it's not really a plus. Immediately tributes it for Jinzo. Danique, that might have been a little bit of a misplay by Danique, not going aggressive on just the one face-down monster. But maybe he feels like he didn't have an answer to a Paranoid play at the time. But that Jinzo potentially locking up a lot of Danique's back row. And Septimus just grabbing a +1 off of it, so... And then, of course, going -1 off of the Tribute Summon, but... And then he swings immediately into a Nidoria, so... Interesting, there goes the Jinzo immediately. All this hype up of the Jinzo turning everything off, and then he just swings into a Nidoria. To be fair, I don't know how common Twisted Personality Warriors run cards like Nidoria. But Danique going to immediately summon Zoma in the end phase there to start getting aggressive and start doing damage. He's going to start getting counters on a Twisted Personality. But also opening up his Zoma to a Paranoid play. So here we go, here's the attack. Only one back row in Septimus' hand, but he has shown that he does have Sphere Karibos, so perhaps one of those comes out. He's thinking. Doesn't know what he did, you know, it could be a Zoma. And he's thinking if he wants to deal 1800 here. No matter what happens here, more than likely, a counter will be going on TP, unless he's thinking on sphering the Zoma. He is going to Sphere Karibo the Zoma, okay. Now he could remove the Zoma next turn with a Paranoid. Danique thinking if he wants to swap Zoma to defense mode, apparently. We're going to give Danique a warning for stalling. The match is already over. This is not live. Spheric Rebo swapping the Zoma to defense mode. Both players show that no life points dealt. Nobody's had to use their skills. TP, we're on, I believe, turn 4, turn 6. And still no counters on TP. So there's the Paranoid play, immediately hitting Twister. Twister's a very nice card in Twisted Personality. Pops a card, plus gives you a counter on your TP. That's very nice. Moth from hand. That is all 3 games. Danique has destroyed the Paranoid. And a Moth has come down as a result of it. So Darth Moth very consistent at getting that Moth into their hand. But Danique does have a counter on Twisted Personality. And he does have a Zoma on the field to potentially eradicate Septimus's life points. Zoma definitely just very difficult to deal with Dark Moth. You gotta have a lot of backward. You gotta have like triple dust to just make sure you get that Zoma off the field. But over to Danique here, we've got 5 cards versus 4 cards. Again, Septimus does not shuffle the Paranoid into the deck to draw another card. The turn that it happens, he just seems to wait a turn to do it. So Danique could look to crash a Zoma here. It would give him 3 counters on his Twisted Personality. He would take damage from the battle, and then Septimus would take the 35. Danique also has a full back row here at this point, so one of these is potentially a Nightmare Wheel. So I think it's worthwhile for Danique to attempt to swing into the Moth. But it's a matter of, does Danique think it's worthwhile to swing into the Moth? Summons an additional Command Knight. Well, the Command Knight can't be attacked, so I guess that's okay. He can swing the Command Knight into the face down, potentially to Koichi, also potentially a Midoriya, so I think it's best to swing with the Zoma first here. But we'll see what Danique thinks is best. Lots of thinking going on. This is the finals. You can't blame them for spending, you know, a few precious seconds to make sure they don't misplay. So he is going to swing with the Zoma first. The smart move in my opinion. So if this goes through, Danique would take 17, and then Septimus would take 35. So he's going to drop another Paranoid, okay. So, and Septimus has not activated his skill, so it may be just something where whenever Septimus doesn't activate his skill to draw into the Moth, it's because he doesn't want, or to put back the Paranoid and draw another card, he doesn't want to accidentally draw into his second Moth. That is a Koichi. Here's the draw. Will he accidentally draw into the last Moth on his deck so he cannot activate his Paranoid skill? I believe that's what he is avoiding, or trying to avoid whenever he doesn't activate his skill, is it means that he has multiple Paranoids in his hand and he's afraid that he's going to draw the last Moth in his deck. Very low chance of that happening. 1 Moth out of, well then it was 17 cards, but maybe that's the reason why he doesn't want to activate the skill, or he's just forgetting to activate the skill, I don't know. But the Command comes down, it kills the Koichi. Koichi replaces the card resource by drawing another card. So not exactly a plus here, but no, not a minus. You don't take a minus for losing a monster in battle. So Septimus has the draw off the skill. He has the special summon off the skill. He has both parts of his skills available. TP only has 1 counter so far. I have a feeling it's going to be getting multiple counters this turn or next turn. Septimus asks if he has anything in the standby phase. Danique is thinking, which means that he does have something in this. So he can pop this Paranoid. He's wondering if the second Moth is in the hand. If the second Moth is in the hand, then Septimus cannot activate his skill here. Because he won't. I guess he could, and he could summon a Paranoid from the deck, right? Yeah, he could summon a Paranoid from the deck. But is this the skill? Okay, it's the first part of the skill. It could have been the second part where he's putting a Paranoid back and shuffling. He gets the Moth. Danique perhaps wishing that he had destroyed the Paranoid, but it's bitten him 3 times now. He's popped the Paranoid and a Moth has come out of the hand because of it. So, but there's the first part of the skill. Let's see if Septimus activates the second to draw another card and put him in a pretty solid spot. He'll have 6 cards. I don't really see a reason not to activate the second part of the skill at this point. Now that both Moths are out, I feel like put a Paranoid back, draw a card. Especially because there would only be 2 Paranoids in the deck instead of 3. Usually whenever you're putting it back, you now have 3 dead Paranoids in the deck, but in this case you would only have 2 dead Paranoids in the deck. So Danique does have 1 offerings. It does mean that Danique will not be able to draw next turn, so he's just going to remain with this board state. He had 2 offerings, so offerings do not stack. He doesn't have to skip 2 draw phases. He still only has to skip his next draw phase. Oh, wow, smiley face. So, a little interesting there. Danique will not draw, but he can attack with the Command Knight, potentially giving him a second counter on the Twisted Personality. So Septimus is out of Moths at this point. He could put a Moth back into the deck and draw. Maybe that's also why he doesn't like just going for the +1 immediately. I think Septimus was running Night Beams. I don't know if he took them out, but if he went for the +1, maybe he sees a Night Beam and he can Night Beam one of those offerings. So there's what Danique was thinking about last turn, whenever he was thinking if he wanted to pop the Paranoid. He does have a Wild Tornado, so he can pop the Zoma, which means this attack may... Okay, it does go through, and it gives Danique his 2 counters, so TP is live on Danique's next turn. Danique... potentially a little far behind right now, because Septimus is going to get another draw off of his skill. If he remembers to use it, he will go up to 4 cards versus Danique's 1. But Danique does have 2 counters. He puts the Moth back. Dark Moth, though, not really a deck that, once you lose the Moths, you don't really have win conditions left. Like, Burn is really the only win condition that you have left. Danique is at almost full life, so we'll see. Septimus has card advantage, but his cards aren't really win conditions at this point. We'll see, though. We'll see what happens. Then he draws a card. He can rip a card out of Septimus' hand. He's going to do that. Right now, could potentially rip a Sphere Kribo. Septimus shuffles his 2 cards. I feel like that means he does have a Sphere Kribo. He doesn't want to lose it. Rolling a die. I think people do this to kind of make sure that it's random. But he does lose a Paranoid. That kind of sucks, because he could have seen one of the Moths that he put a Moth back into his deck, so if he was able to see that Moth again, he would have a Paranoid in the hand and try and get the Moth out from the hand. Swings, this is damage on board here, would be lethal. But Septimus has 3 cards to try and say no to this. Septimus thinking, so there's the Sphere Kribo that he was... I'm assuming he was trying to protect the Sphere Kribo. And just having the extra Paranoid was whatever. But both of those cards are cards he didn't want to lose for sure. So Sphere's 1, and then Nightmare Wheel's the other. So Danique is on. You have 8 turns to win, Danique. Of his turns. So it's 16 total turns will pass. Or would it be 17 since he's taking damage now? Septimus doesn't draw anything usable. Hopefully that wasn't his Moth. But the other issue is that with TP cards, this doesn't really do anything, because he will lose 15. By the time he loses 1500, he'll have 3 counters on Twisted Personality and be allowed to pop the Nightmare Wheel. So even Nightmare Wheel isn't really a win condition. The Zoma is really the only win condition at this point for Septimus. Swings for 16. He takes it again. That's another counter on Twisted Personality, which simply speeds up how quickly he's going to... Okay. So he's going to dust the offerings in the end phase. Make sure that it's not chainable. He's going to take another 500. That's 3, so Danique can pop the Nightmare Wheel next turn. He sets 2, potentially setting a Zoma. But unfortunately, a Zoma would not be lethal here. So Danique can still eat a Zoma and be fine. But he's going to get rid of those Twisted Personality counters he's been stockpiling to pop the Nightmare Wheel. Sees another back row. Brutal. Septimus immediately going to reveal that one of his back rows that does nothing, cannot stop an attack. And that's going to pop Danique's Nightmare Wheel. OCG art of the Nightmare Wheel. Looks like an actual human. But Septimus has the offerings, and that's just going to be game. He cannot stop both attacks. So there you go, Danique DeJong. After quite the, I guess, hiatus. You know, after a bit of a drought, not winning, back on top, wins Win-A-Box number 2, 48 players. Congratulations, Danique. You know I'm always rooting for you. Takes it 2-1. TP Warriors, in my opinion, the best deck of the format. Currently, I would say goes to Twisted Personality. But I'm sure there's still some people that would like to debate. So that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed. We're going to go ahead and take it over to our tournament breakdown so you guys can see kind of some of the decks that were played in the event. And then we're also going to do a top 8 deck list coming up. So stay tuned for that in just a second. All right, guys, we're back. I'm up here now. Just so I don't block anything down here on the graph. But anyway, so this is our breakdown of the Win-A-Box number 2. We had 48 players. This time, about the same amount as last time. And these are the decks, actually. These are all 48 decks. We don't need an other category or any sort of rogue category, anything like that. So everything kind of nicely fit into established known decks. So we're going to go right to left here as usual. So starting off here, we see the one Gaia, the lone Gaia that came with the new starter decks. So one played, not topped. It's okay. It's a decent deck. It's around, you know, you'll see it sometimes. And then here we have 3 Warrior Moth, which is actually the exact same number that played last Win-A-Box, Win-A-Box number 1, only this time none of them topped. Last time 3 played, 3 topped. This time 3 played, 0 topped. So interesting to say which tournament is a better representation of Warrior Moth's strengths. I still think it's a really good deck. I actually prefer it over Dark Moth, but I know not everybody will. And then here we see Relinquished with 4 plays and 0 topped, and Spellproof Armor right next to it, 5 played and 0 topped. So Spellproof Armor, Relinquished, still somewhat popular decks, but not very good decks in my opinion. So still a lot of people playing them, they're just not very good. And then we go on to TP Warrior, my vote for the best deck currently in the format. So we had 7 people play, about half of them topped, including Danique DeJong, your Speed Duel number 2 winner. And then we have Stall, unfortunately had 8 people play. That is 1 in every 6 people playing Stall, and one of them did top. We'll be looking at deck lists later, so you'll get to see everybody who topped in their deck lists, but I guess that'll be in a really soon actually. But yeah, so not happy to see Burn Stall. Last time 3 people played it, this time 8 people played it, so I don't know if it's getting more popular. But yeah, so 8 people played. The same number of people played Burn Stall type decks as Dark Moth. So here we've got Dark Moth. Last time, Win-A-Box number 1, we saw 13 people play. We saw nobody top with it. So you kind of see like a massive drop off. It was almost cut in half in terms of the number of people wanting to play the deck. So we had 8 people play it this time. 2 did top. So and you saw 1 in the finals. So, and actually, they had to face off against each other in the beginning. So the 2 Dark Moth players had to knock each other, or you had to kamikaze each other in the very first round. So maybe it could have gone even further. But it actually did top twice here, and did make the finals. I don't think Dark Moth has won a tournament since Jinso's dropped. So yeah, it does have a lot of tops though. So, and then this time it did get into the top cut this time. 0 for 13 last time. Anyways, and then you have Interconflict Warrior, probably the most popular deck right now. You have 12 people play it, 2 people top, so that's a decent showing. And in my opinion, is probably the most popular deck right now, and the one that you should expect to see the most of. But that's your breakdown, pretty nice and neat. It's nice that there's no rogue categories or anything. Every deck played fell into a known deck, basically, so that's nice. But yeah, stay tuned and we'll have the top 8 deck lists. And here we are, guys. We've got the top 8 deck list for you. So for this top 8, we're going to go by the deck type rather than by their placement. So we're not going to go top 8, then top 4, then second and first. Instead, we're just going to go by Twisted. We're going to show you all the Twisted Personality Warriors, then the Interconflict Warriors, then the Dark Moths, and then the Lone Burn for the top 8. So kicking it off here, we've got the Twisted Personality Warriors. This is Dragon Champions list. I finished top 8 with it. Some things that you can see is I like the Blade Knights here. I do think the Blade Knight has like a nice niche where number one, he can get up to 2,000, which means that he can get over a Command Knight that's in defense mode, or he can get over a normal summoned Gaia, I think charging Gaia the Fierce Knight. So it's really nice that he can just kind of get over everything because he's 2,000. And then also his effect is that whenever he's the only monster on the field, on your side of the field, he can negate flip effects, which can turn off things like Maneater Bug or Old Vindictive or Decoichi, which is also really nice if you're facing something like Stall or Burn. Or just in general, like a lot of people play like Maneater Bugs and Decoichis, like Dark Moth plays Decoichi. Maneater Bug can be seen in like Warrior Moth or Moth variants in general, so. And then you never know if you're going to face something like really weird or rogue that runs like Mask of Darkness or something, so turning off flip effects is really nice. I think that Blade Knight's like really underappreciated in that sense, and I don't see a whole lot of people run it. And then you have the playset of the Command Knights and the Gearfrieds, which is super standard. Twister, which I think is really nice. He's not running any Dust Tornadoes. He favors Twisters because they give you a counter on Twisted Personality. A little risky because the Twisters can only pop face-up spells and traps, but for the most part, like the only cards that really threaten you are face-up spells and traps. So outside of like being able to Dust Tornado something that was just said, like if your opponent like sets an Offerings and then you have Dust Tornado, you can pop it and he doesn't get to use it. But other than that, which requires you to have Dust Tornado before your opponent has their cards, and you have to have Dust Tornado set before they set their cards, so it's kind of circumstantial and just not the best. So I think the Twister's fine. Triple Offerings, super standard. And then you have Triple Zoma, Double Nightmare Wheel, because this is Twisted Personality. And then one Prideful Roar. I like Prideful Roar in Twisted Personality decks because Prideful Roar not only gets you over pretty much everything, but it also gives you 2 counters on Twisted Personality, because there's one counter whenever you pay life points. Actually, does it give you 3? No, okay, it gives you 2 counters. I was like counting the plus 300 attack as like damage for some reason, but where you pay life points equal to the difference in the 2 monsters' attack, which gives you 1 counter, and then you win the battle for that, and then your opponent takes the 300 difference thanks to Prideful, so that's another counter. So that's 2 counters for Prideful Roar, which is really, really nice. And then looking at the sideboard here, so looking at the main board, there are no Sphere Creepos in this deck, which I think is a little risky because getting rid of Jinzo pretty much comes down to like Sphere Creepo or Offerings, and so not having any spheres is kind of risky. He has the Gaias here, which I guess could like take the place of Gearfrieds if you're not in like a Moth matchup or something. And then you have the Possessed Dark Souls, which is nice because like there are a lot of people running around with Relinquish and stuff. Normally I'd say like don't run it, but because I think it only takes like a couple things, and like it's probably only good against Relinquish. But people are playing Relinquish, like you may actually run into like one Relinquish player if you go through 6 rounds in something like a Win-A-Box or some of the other tournaments that other organizers run. You may run into Relinquished, and you'll be really happy that you had the Possessed Dark Souls. DD Crow, which is really nice, also against Relinquished, and is also pretty good against like Gravekeepers and stuff, though almost nobody's running Gravekeepers anymore. Ever since Jinzo dropped and killed Gravekeeper Burn, nobody really runs Gravekeepers. But and then you have Warrior Elim and Aerosol, which are okay. Obviously, Warrior Elim's good in the Warrior matchup, and Aerosol's good against Paranoid matchups, where you can just get rid of the Moths. The thing that I like the most about them is that you can technically plus off them, but the things that's like really bad about them is that you have to wait until it's your turn to play them. So they're really, really slow, and that's why I don't run them, is because usually like with Aerosol, like if your opponent makes the Moth play, he goes +2, and then once he has the Moth on the board, because you decided to run Aerosol, you don't have an out to him that turn. So he's probably going to kill another one of your cards and go +3, or he's going to just inflict a massive amount of damage to you. And then it's finally your turn, and then you finally go 1 for 1 getting the Moth off the board. And at that point you're -3, and like you may not be able to come back, especially if you went first, so you're already behind a card in the card count. That's just brutal. So I really don't like Warrior Warrior Elim and these like next turn wipe the boards type thing. I think that just they're too slow. Warrior Elim, I guess it doesn't really apply too much to him, but the idea is kind of similar, where it's just like you could have had a battle trap or something that saved you that turn. But some people run it and some people like it. So next we're moving on to, I do not know, did you just like smash your head on the keyboard to make this name Hefted? Yeah, we're gonna pronounce, I think it's pronounced Hefted, but if not, you know, we're pronouncing it Hefted. So here's his Twisted Personality build. Again, Blade Knights, really nice to see, Command Knights, Gear Freeds. And then you have Old Vindictive, which is really interesting because I think there's a lot of things you can run. These can be Man-Eater bugs, these could be Nudorias, I think is the most popular one because it's just a lot more versatile. So these are interesting. No idea what the idea behind these are, but yeah, and then you see the Twisters, which are really good with Twisted Personality. Again, opting for Twisters and Wild Tornadoes over Dust Tornado. The offerings, which are really standard, but again, no Sphere Kribos, really risky, you know, running into like a Jinzo. And then you have the Zomas, the Nightmare Wheels, super standard burn to get you more Twisted Personality counters, and then the Wild Tornadoes, which are really nice. They're okay, you know, they're circumstantial, and that's why I don't like them, but a lot of people are running a lot of back row hate, like Dust Tornadoes and Night Beams and stuff, and if they hit these, they can really benefit you there, so I think they're fine. Lava Golem, which is just a nice like tech in the side card to just kind of get rid of 2 monsters for 1, which is pretty nice. It doesn't plus you anything, like your opponent goes from 2 monsters to 1, so they lose 1 card, and then you lose 1 card, you lose your Lava Golem over to them. So, but it can help clear boards. And then if you can sit on like a Zoma or something, it can be really difficult for them. Hades, you know, can turn off a lot of things. And then Santa Claus, I don't like Santa Claus. I think that he's a terrible, terrible card. I think it's like you go like -2 off summoning him. You give your, you know, you tribute your opponent's monster, give him another monster, and then your opponent draws after that. So it's like you lose a card, your opponent draws a card on their end phase. It's just, it's -2 overall. And then you still have to get over it. You still have to get over the 2500 things. So I think it could kind of work with like Twisted Personality because he's in defense mode. He's 2500. He only has 1200 attack, and so you can kind of ram into that. Like you summon him into defense mode, and then you can kind of like ram into him with your monsters and like rack up TP counters, I guess. But overall, I don't think that's worth like, you know, inter-conflict guys. They'll just tribute it off. You know, Moth will appreciate the extra like monster. You know, an extra draw power, so it's kind of awkward, I guess, if you can get their Moth off the board with it, or if you can get rid of Relinquished. I don't know. I don't really like Santa Claus that much, but I guess he has his uses, like, in the right circumstance. Ladybug, which I know is, like, really nice against a lot of burn decks, like Nightmare Wheel does 500 damage, Twister does 500 damage, and things like that, and so it's nice to have, you know, back whenever GK Burn was still being played, you know, Gravekeeper Curse would do 500 damage, so having Ladybug give you 500 per standby phase was really nice. Extra Wild Tornado, and then Jar of Avarice is also something. Jar is mostly for like stall, and I don't think you're going to win a stall battle. Like you run the lowest card count, you know, like 20 cards. A lot of decks are running like 22, 23, 24, 25. So Jar, I just don't think is a very good. I think it's like counterintuitive to like this burn style play. So I don't know. I don't really like the Jar pick, but I'm sure there's a game where it may come up and you'll wish that you had Jar. So, and then lastly for the Twisted Personality, there were 3 players. We showed you a top 8, a top 4, and then we have our winner, Danique, first place here, with his version of Twisted Personality. And so you have the Command Knights, you have the Gear Freed, you have a Gaia. He had Nudorias, so that's nice. Hefted had the Old Vindictive. So a little bit of monster destruction there. Also kind of helps deal with like Jinzo or Moths. And then again, opting for the Twisters and the Wild Tornadoes over the Dusts. And then you have the triple offerings, you have the triple Zoma, you have the double Nightmare Wheel, the 1 Prideful Roar, giving you the 2 counters. And then Danique's sideboard was actually really interesting. It's actually the Paranoid package. And so I'm not sure what 6 cards he takes out to get this in. I imagine like Nudorias and the Twisters maybe. To kind of get these 6 cards in, or I guess only 5, and then you swap out the skill. But you have the Paranoid package. No idea when you would want to side this in. It's sort of like if you want to go from Twisted Personality, if you feel like the matchup is bad, you can swap to basically Warrior Moth. I imagine he takes out the Nidorias and the Twisters, and then 1 other card somewhere near, like maybe the Prideful Roar. and then you get in your package, and now you are Warrior Moth instead of Twisted Personality, which can be kind of nice. You know, people side in like ladybugs to kind of help deal with Twisted Personality and weird things like that. So it's nice to be able to sort of smoke screen from Twisted Personality to Moth, just depending on what matchup you want, because there are matchups where Warrior Moth would be better, and there are matchups where Twisted Personality would be better, and they definitely have different strengths and weaknesses. So this is a really smart idea from him that I'm sure he used a couple times to steal away games that caught a lot of people off guard, swapping from TP Warrior to Warrior Moth. So really smart from him. Bit of a meme. But, you know, it did win, and so we'll see if this catches on and a lot of people start smoke screening decks. So congrats to Danique, great deck list. Then we move on to our Inner Conflict Warrior players. So we have top 8, Lucas. Lucas actually went undefeated in Swiss. A bit of a curse to go undefeated and then immediately lose in the top 8. But he was playing Inner Conflict Warrior, very popular deck. We saw 12 people out of the 48, which is exactly 25%. 1 in every 4 people were playing Inner Conflict in this tournament. And so you see the triple Jinzo here, very, very standard, having 3 tributes. I don't know exactly how I feel about having 3 tributes. I know that, you know, it's basically you run 2 or you run 3. If you run 2, you don't brick on them as often, because I feel like Inner Conflict, like the perfect Inner Conflict, like for example Mirror Match, which probably comes up a lot because a lot of people are playing Inner Conflict. The perfect mirror match, in my opinion, is you want them to have to play their skill first. Whenever you play a skill that only activates 1 time, whoever has to activate their skill first, you know, takes control of the board, and then you activate it second and you take control back, and then they can't activate their skill a second time to take it back again, so you just maintain control of the board. And so with Inner Conflict, to me, the best way to win it, and it's the same thing with like the Paranoid matchup, is build your deck to force them to activate it first. So if you run triple tributes, you may be forced to like see a Jinzo in your opening hand or something, and then you have 3 cards to work with, whereas they have 4 cards to work with, and that could lead to you being forced to run out of resources faster and have to activate your skill and make your Jinzo first. And then he follows up, especially if you're going first and you open a Jinzo. So you'll have to play test and see what your luck is, but the flip side of that is if you only have 2 Jinzo and you just straight up don't see it, then you're probably going to lose because you won't get to activate your skill. So it's a bit of a conundrum. I recommend you just play test. A lot of people run 3, a lot of people light 3, so that's probably the correct ratio. And then it's a warrior deck, so you see the Gear Freeze, you see the Command Knights, very standard, you see the guys here. And then I like this, the Sphere Karibos and the offerings, being able to out Jinzo a lot more consistently. A lot of people are not running the Sphere Karibos to help get over it, but they do usually have something like New Doria or Old Vindictive, some sort of monster destruction, which is a little bit slower, but can also work. So have your Jinzos out, guys, or have your Jinzo outs, you know, like you need to make sure that you have, I would say at least 4, maybe 5 in your deck, or he's going to come a knocking, and you're not going to have a fun time. And then he's got 2 Zomas here, and then the 2 Dust Tornadoes. We saw people running Twister and Wild Tornado. Inner Conflict, I think, is much more suited to run Dust Tornado. You don't get the 500 from the Twister or anything. And then sideboard, he just has his Tribute swap outs, so like Gap and Dark Ruler Ardez have their uses against certain decks. Gap is good against Stall, not letting them set anything. And then Ardez, also really good in turning off a lot of effects. So you just kind of swap those in and take out a Jinzo as needed. And then an extra Newdoria, which can come up just for some extra destruction, helps you get rid of a Jinzo, helps you get rid of a Moth. And then you've got the 3rd Zoma, and then Skill Successor, which is a little interesting to me. I think like sometimes it's good, other times it's like I'd rather have a Kunai or I'd rather have like a Prideful Roar, but Skill Successor has its uses, so I think it's fine. And then we're going to look at a better Inner Conflict player, Lucas. We have top 4 Shimakaru, who won 1 extra match. And then, so we see Dark Ruler Ardez here and the Jinzo. No Gap, it looks like 2nd Jinzo down in the sideboard. So those are basically your tribute options. You have Jinzo, you have Dark Ruler Ardez, you have Ardez. And then, or you have Gap, Jinzo, Dark Ruler Ardez, and then this 2nd Jinzo probably comes up here. So, but here you see Shimakaru, he's running 2 tributable monsters and 23 cards. That's a little risky to me, just you don't have any draw power. So it just looks like you actually have things that stop your draws. So it just kind of looks like you're running the risk of not seeing your tribute summonable monster, which can kind of kill your Inner Conflict. You can still use it, you don't have to tribute off the monster, but that's kind of the big play of it. So Only 2 tributes in a 23 card deck. I guess you can bump it up to 3 if you put Jinzo in and take something else out. But it worked for me. Finished top 4, so that's really solid. Again, we've got our Gear Freeze, we've got our Command Knight, we got our Gaia, we got Monster Destruction with Midoriya, we got double Sphere Kuriboh, we got triple Offerings. Definitely not falling prey to Jinzo. He's got 7 total outs here. And I guess he's got 8 because he's got another Kuriboh on the side. So definitely not falling prey to Jinzo. With this deck, he's got plenty of outs. And then he's running the Twisters over the Dust Tornadoes. When you're not running Twisted Personality, it's a little risky because your Twisters give the Twisted Personality players a counter, and it makes you lose life points, and you don't really get to do anything with those life points because you're playing Inner Conflict. So they're not bad. I just, and if you run Dust, they get turned off by Jinzo. Though, what are you Dust Tornadoing if Jinzo's on the board? It's sort of like Jinzo turns off all the things you would want to Dust Tornado anyways, outside of, I guess, like Paranoid. But Twister has its uses, so. And then we've got Nightmare Wheels and Zoma's very, very common theme here. And then we have 2 Ladybugs. He is running 23 cards, so I think it's good to make sure that you see it. With 2 Ladybugs, again, to help combat the burn. And then he's got RFIs. Interesting to flip Warriors face down. To flip things like Relinquish face down. Can kind of slow down Moth a little bit. You flip the Paranoid's target. If Paranoid targets a Warrior, they can flip it down with RFI. RFI, it's a card that you can run. Then we're moving on to our Dark Moth players. We've got 5 Dimension TCG, also known as 5Ds, by just me. But Emilian here, he is, I guess you could say, pretty much the perennial Dark Moth player of this format. He has, the best overall results. Last tournament, last one of box number 1, when no Dark Moth players topped, Emilian was the only Dark Moth player to bubble. So at 4-2, almost topped with it. But you know this package, Paranoid and Moth, at this point, if you play speed duels. He runs 2 gaps as tribute summonable monsters, and then he's got 1 Jinzo on the side. He's got triple Sphere Kuriboh, he's got double Dekoichi, double Midoriya, triple Night Beam. That's something that I really only see him run. I'm not paying attention to a million Dark Moth deck lists, but it's definitely something that is I see in him, or in his deck lists a lot, is a lot of Night Beams. And I think that that's something that keeps him sort of at the top, because that's Dark Moth is a very much like go for game type deck where you just explode, you push for game right then and there, especially because you have so much draw power. You can see double Moth very quickly, you can get double Moth out fairly consistently, and you just kind of want a Night Beam on your turn. It's, Dust Tornadoes, you got to set them for a turn, and so he's kind of going for that, 1-turn kill. So I like the Night Beams. Again, you have Allure, plenty of dark targets to help you get into your Paranoids. You have your Offerings, you have your Zomas. He's got Gaias in the sideboard, which I like. One thing, I think I talked about it during the match between Danique and Septemis, was Dark Moth doesn't have a whole lot of meat to their deck. You see the Paranoid package, which this is all one package, which they use with the skill to drop the Moth. After that, they don't really have win conditions. Not running wheels anymore. They used to run wheels, and so your wheel plus Zoma used to be a win condition, just all that burn. Jinzo kind of turns off a lot of that, which is part of the reason why I think whenever Jinzo showed up, it knocked Dark Moth off a little bit, is because Dark Moth had 2 sides. They either won with the Moth play or they won with their burn. And now that they don't have wheel, and their burn kind of gets turned off by a Jinzo play, you're seeing them drop more games than they used to. But yeah, so you don't really see a whole lot of meat here in the deck. Like Midoriya's, their purpose is to die. Dekoichi, their purpose is to die. Sphere Kuriboh, just tilt it, throw it to the grave. Night Beam, 1 for 1. Allure doesn't give you pluses; it just sees you more of your garbage cards. Gap is solid, but you need to go -1 to bring him out. You got to tribute something. Zoma's solid. Offerings is like a delayed -1. You don't get to draw. It loses you your draw for that turn. So yeah, it's a lot of just Moth or bust, and that's something that I never liked about the deck. I don't like the fact that it's so reliant on the Moth play, especially after Jinzo dropped it. It used to be reliant on the Moth play plus burn. Now it's mostly just reliant on the Moth play. And you got to build around that, and so that's what Emilian is doing here, in my opinion, with dropping the guys, these big boys that can come down and help give you a lot more power and meat to your deck, where it's like Gaia, is a presence on the field. compared to something like Midoriya or Dekoichi, who is their whole purpose is to just die. So, one Jinzo to bring in, a third Dekoichi. Interesting on just what matchups he sides those in on. And then you see a double Cyclone, which is interesting. I guess you can pop your own Paranoid with the Cyclone. It's interesting that he chooses it over Dust Tornado, over Twister, over Wild Tornado. But you can do a cool little play where like you drop your Paranoid with a Moth in hand, and then you double Cyclone that Paranoid to pop one of their cards, and then get to drop your Moth. So that's neat. Going on to our next Dark Moth, you guys all saw him, Septimus, in the final. 5Ds and Septimus actually had to collide in the first round of the top 8. So maybe Dark Moth could have got a top 4 in a second place finish or something if that didn't happen, but sometimes it does just happen that way. But here we go. So Septimus, you know, again, the Paranoid package. Everybody pretty much does the same thing of triple Paranoid, double Moth. 3 Moth that gets really bricky, 1 Moth. You don't want 1 Moth and Dark Moth specifically. Like Warrior Moth could maybe run 1 Moth, but Dark Moth definitely wants 2 Moth in the hand, just because you draw so much, and Dark Moth really loves the they popped my Paranoid with Dust Tornado, I get to summon a Moth from the hand, because they almost always have a Moth in the hand because they have so much draw with Dekoichi and Allure. So Dark Moth really wants 2 Moth. Warrior Moth, you could maybe drop it to 1. There's pros and cons to that. And then you have the Jinzo and the Gap, which is kind of what Emilian was running, 5 Dimension was running. The triple Dekoichi, and then no Midoriya is interesting, no Monster Destruction. A little risky, I guess. He has the offerings, you know, like game 1, this deck I feel is fairly vulnerable to Jinzo, where it's like again, Dark Moth, you have to make the Moth. It's just the whole idea is you gotta make Moth, because just the rest of the deck just doesn't do anything. I guess you have Burn here, which is really nice, but the rest of the deck is just they die, you run out of resources, you gotta make the Moth at some point. It's the bulk of your deck. And then they steal it with Inner Conflict, they drop a Jinzo, and this deck's probably going to have to scoop. Just because, well, you got a Sphere Creep with a Jinzo, and that's about all, that's the only out that you really have. And like, that's pretty much it. I don't even think you can get over it. He's got 14, does Jinzo have 1200 defense or 1400 defense? Fuck, I should know that. But regardless, he's got the Sphere Creep, he can tilt it, that's pretty much your only hope. Because all these trap cards don't work, these cards don't kill Jinzo. So yeah, definitely like brutal. And if I can't remember if Jinzo's 14, but if he has 1400 defense, then literally Dekoichi can't even get over him. So it's just they steal your Moth, they make the Jinzo, you scoop. Go into the sideboard where you can side in the offerings and then have, you know, a chance. But yeah, so we've got the double Night Beam, we've got the Sphere Creep, super standard. Double Night Beam again with Emilian, he was running 3. Septimus runs 2. I definitely think Night Beam is a nice addition to Dark Moth because its goal is to just run you over as fast as possible. You can't, you know, take turns or, you know, wasting time setting Dust Tornado and stuff like that. Twister kind of does something similar where, like, if they Nightmare Wheel or Zoma you can keep Twister in your hand and activate it on your turn to get rid of these cards. But I do like the Night Beam specifically in Dark Moth decks. You've got the Allure, you got the Dust, and then you got the Burn combo here. He does offer the Nightmare Wheels, and then 25 cards, you know, a lot of cards to the deck, but you see a lot of draw power, so it doesn't hurt as much as it would in a deck that has no draw power. And then we've got the 1 DD Crow, like we said, you know, Gravekeepers, Relinquished, and whatnot. It could also, you know, against the Moth matchup, you know, banish their Paranoid. You have to do it well before they activate their skill, because you can't chain it to the skill. And then you got Offerings, definitely helps deal with, you know, Moth matchups, definitely will help him with Jinzo. And then we've got the Wild Tornadoes that a lot of people opt for, and a 3rd Dust Tornado. So a lot of back row hate. You see the double Night Beams, you see triple Dust Tornado, and you see double Wild Tornado. So tons of back hate. We did see it against Danique. Both decks had a lot of back row hate, so very popular this format. And then we did save the worst for last, Felly. Despicable Burn deck. Look at this, disgusting. But we gotta go over it. Congratulations on your top 8. Literally, that's it. You got in, and that's it, Burn play, okay? You got in, and then immediately eliminated, okay? Dude, you gotta bully the Burn players, or they're never gonna learn. Yeah, this is very interesting. I believe he calls this Zombie Burn. I think he has a slight, I saw a list from him that's a little bit different very, very recently. Obviously, this list he played 2 weeks ago, or a week ago. So he's updated it a little bit since then, but I think he calls it Zombie Burn or Zomburn. You see the Lava Golem. No burn deck is completed without Lava Golem since he was added to the game. Triple Zombina to recycle a lot of these level 4s. And just like keep them coming. You know, there's a really nice combo and loop. It's not really like a full loop, but it's a nice just repetitive play with Zombina, Haunted Shrine, Yomi Ship. Very annoying where they just keep bringing back the Zombina, which keeps you got to get through Yomi Ship like 2-3 times. You've got Nidoria, you've got Golden Ladybug, just the one Amazonosaur's one, and then you've got the triple wheel, the triple Zoma, you've got the triple, you know, Haunted Shrine, and then this is Coffin Seller, if you don't know, which basically just every time a monster goes to your opponent's graveyard, your opponent will take 300 damage. And then you just add that on top of Twisted Personality. You have a ton of burn, and then you just keep getting counters, you keep plussing with the burn. So it can be overwhelming, it can be difficult to deal with, you know, and Feli obviously, you know, he made top 8 out of 48 players, so really solid deck, despite how much I don't like it and wish that nobody ran it. But 8 players played Burn or Stall, some variant. I feel like this deck should, you know, it's like you would think maybe it suffers versus Jinzo, but then you've got like Nidoria's, Yomi Ships, you know, Zombina's to get him back, Tribute for Lava Golem, so it's got plenty of monster removal. It shouldn't necessarily get shut down completely by something like Jinzo. And you got the Warrior Elims to just pop Warriors. Again, I don't really like cards like these just because they're so slow. But, you know, if you're playing a slow game, you know, it's like you can afford to be slow. So, and the Warrior Elims, I'm sure, you know, you pop 2 Warriors. A lot of people aren't respecting them right now. You know, they over-summon, and you get hit with a Warrior Elim, so it's really nice. And then you've got the 2 offerings, you know, just help hit very key monsters, just get them off the board right away. 1 mask, just to add extra burn and lock stuff down. And then you've got the Ladybug, which again is just nice in mirrors where you're constantly getting 500 because a lot of cards do 500 per turn, like Lava Golem does 1,000. So you can cut that in half. Nightmare Wheel does 500, Coffin Seller does 300, Mask does 500, so it's nice having Ladybug to give you 500 per turn. Twister does 500. Not that he's running it, but... and that's the idea. So there's your top 8 deck list. We had 3 Twisted Personality Warriors, we had 2 Inner Conflict Warriors, 2 Dark Moth players, and then 1 Burn. So there's your top 8. That concludes the Win-A-Box number 2, guys. You know, we have got Win-A-Box number 3, right, which is sort of what we do. We finish one Win-A-Box and then immediately announce the next Win-A-Box. So Win-A-Box number 3 will be taking place this Saturday. Today is Wednesday at the timing of this video. And then this Saturday, October 3rd, we will start Win-A-Box number 3. So if you'd like to sign up for that, if you'd like to get in on this action, if you'd like to, you know, make a video or make it into one of our videos, or, you know, get your deck list up here, compete in this, we've got Win-A-Box number 3 that takes place in just under 3 days from now. And that's going to start at 12 p.m. CST. Simply join the Speed Duel League Discord. I'll have a link in the description below. And then send me, Alan Lyon, a deck list. And you're in. It's that simple. Comment in the sign-up channel that you'd like to join, and then send me a deck list. You're in. It's that simple, and you can compete with some of the best Speed Duel players in the world. So, thanks again, guys. That's all from me, and I'll see you guys in the next video.